Happy Wednesday to you fellas. I should be uploading this video today, but at the latest tomorrow morning, Thursday morning. This is going to be another hybrid video. First portion will be available to the general YouTube public. Latter portion of the video will only be available to my Patreon subscribers. And what I wanted to talk about in this video, well, first of all, I've held up, I don't have it in front of me, but I've held up this 1997 version of Mode 1. That was actually the first copyrighted version of Mode 1. Yeah, I had that copyrighted in November of 1997. And I mentioned on a recent video that I had a couple guys who offered me over $1,000 for that 1997 version of Mode 1. For that 1997 version of Mode 1. But I've turned both of them down. Shit. I want $1 million for that version. I recently had a Patreon subscriber. He said, Alan, I'll pay you over $100 for your 1999 eBook version of Mode 1. And I had to laugh at that. And I was like, why would you want to pay me over $100 for an eBook? I mean, a lot of people have paid money beyond the purchase price for a paperback or hardcover version of a book. But for an ebook version? And then I had another subscriber and follower. He said, Alan, why don't you reproduce or republish the 1999? Why would I want to do that? If I was to republish it, it wouldn't really be the 1999 version of Mode 1. It would be the 2022 version of Mode 1. See, y'all don't understand how ebooks and paperbacks work. See, you can republish a paperback. Yeah, you can republish a paperback. You can't really republish an ebook version. But anyway, to get to my point, I did run across a copy of my old 1999 ebook version of Mode 1. And, I did a live stream, I think it was earlier this year or last fall, where I categorized myself as the most original and the most consistent dating coach in the entire manosphere. Meaning that, two things, under the category of original, you're not going to find stuff in my books, in books that were copyrighted or published before mine. It's very little, if anything, in my books that you're going to find in a book that was both copyrighted and published before my books. Like, for example, Mode 1. You ain't going to find that material in a book that was copyrighted or published before I came out with Mode 1. Same with Who Said Again. Same with Possibility of Sex. Same with Beta Male Revolution. The one book you could is No Free Attention, because that's essentially a rewrite of The Possibility of Sex. And in terms of consistency, I rarely have ever contradict my advice. Like, I don't give guys advice, say, in 2009, and then in 2015 said something that was totally contradictory to the advice I said in 2009. So anyway, I was looking over my, if you happen to have a copy of my 1999 ebook version of Mode 1. Well, actually, also something I want to clarify. Some people think my 1999 version of Mode 1 was my very first version of Mode 1. Actually, no. And I actually just mentioned that a few minutes ago when I was talking about my 1997 version. No, my 1999 version of Mode 1 was my first version that I made available to the general public. That was the first version I made available to the general public. But that was not my first version of Mode 1. My very first printed version of Mode 1 was written in April of 1995 on the request of my older brother, Stephen. Yeah, that was my very first version of Mode 1. I wrote it and printed it in April of 1995. And then I had another version about a year later. I tweaked it a bit, added a few things. So I had a slightly modified version in 1996. Then I had another version in 1997. That was the version that got copyrighted. Then I had a 1998 version, slightly modified from the 1997 version. I had a 1998 version. And then my first eBook version, because all four of those first versions, I printed them out like they look like a manual, an 8.5 inch by 11 inch pamphlet or manual. And then the first ebook version was my 1999 version. Because honestly, before 1999, I didn't really know what an ebook was. Honestly, I really didn't. I didn't really know what an ebook was until about spring of 1999. That's when I first learned about somebody, when I was living in Los Angeles, told me about the concept of an ebook. I didn't really know what that was. Basically, it was essentially just me turning my printed version into a PDF. Yeah, I turned it into an Adobe PDF version. And, basically that's what my ebook was. It was just an Adobe PDF version of my printed out version. But yeah, so 1999. Oh, another question I get related to my 1999 ebook version. People say, Alan, I get your 2006 version. Your 2006 paperback. What's the major differences between your 1999 ebook version and your 2006 paperback version? Not too much. Here's at least 3, maybe 4 differences between my 1999 ebook version of Mode 1 and my 2006 paperback version of Mode 1. A lot of the quotes you see, like I quote some of my fellow authors, like Stephen Covey, even Ron Wills here on YouTube. I got a quote from Ron Wills' book, his 2000 book edition of Nice Guys and Players. And I quote my father. I didn't have all those quotes you see at the beginning of the chapters in the 2006 version. I didn't have those quotes. Yeah, I was first major. I didn't have those quotes in my 1999 version. Second thing, I had some verbal seduction stories similar to Who Said It Again. I had at least 2 or 3 verbal seduction. Verbal seduction story number 1 was actually in my 1999 version of Mode 1. I discussed, verbal seduction story number 1 and 1 or 2 other verbal seduction stories. So it was similar to Who Said It Again in that regard. It had a lot more profanity and sexually explicit language, which my brother was critical of. He was the one who encouraged me to make my 2006 version more PG-13. Because he was like, dude, this book is never going to sell mainstream if you have all this profanity and X-rated language in it. So yeah, I changed a lot of my language in the 2006 version. Yeah, the 1999 version of Mode 1 was full of profanity and R-rated, X-rated, and triple X-rated language. And final thing would be, I had some word-for-word examples, dialogue examples of being both Mode 1 and Mode 1 Hardcore. And again, my brother, he was an influence on my 2006 version. He really made a good point. He said, man, you shouldn't have these dialogue examples in your book. And I was like, why not? He said, because then people are going to try to specifically imitate you. You don't want a bunch of men all over the country and all over the world just trying to imitate you. He said they need to apply Mode 1 to their own style of talking and come up with their own opening comments and opening dialogue and that type of thing, which I generally agree with. But anyway, what I want to touch on in this video, in both my 2006 version of Mode 1 and my 1999 version of Mode 1, you'll notice in Chapter 8, I have the 7 rules of executing a Mode 1 approach. The 7 rules of executing a Mode 1 approach. I'm going to go highlight each of my 7 rules and add some commentary on each rule, and mainly discuss how much pushback or disagreements I've gotten from each one of these rules over the last 23 plus years, and to see if I've contradicted. I know I already looked at them, and I know I haven't. And this gives basis for why I call myself the most original and consistent dating coach in the history of the manosphere. But anyway, I'm gonna probably do 2 or 3 of the rules for the YouTube general public, and then if you want to hear my other rules and commentary, you'll have to become a Patreon subscriber. So here we go. Here was from my 1999 ebook version of Mode 1. This is from my 1999 ebook version of Mode 1. Let's start with Mode 1, rule number 1. Rule number 1 for executing a Mode 1 approach with women. Rule number 1, never hesitate to approach a woman and initiate a conversation with a woman that you find attractive and sexy. The only valid reason not to approach a woman is if she has a wedding ring or engagement ring on her finger, or if you're simply not attracted to her physically. Now, it's interesting. A lot of guys nowadays don't believe. This is what PUAs later on start calling cold approaching. I never called my Mode 1 approach cold approaching. I simply called it initiating a conversation with a new female acquaintance. That was always my categorization of rule number 1. I refer to that as initiating a conversation with a new female acquaintance. But yeah, once PUA, conventional PUAs took over the scene around 2005, 2006, they start referring to that as cold approaching. A lot of people have criticisms today of the concept of cold approaching. I've never had an issue. Now, I'll tell you what I don't believe in doing, and I'm going to have to call out a London-based PUA in the process. There's this, I've mentioned him a few times, there's this London-based PUA known as YAD. And in London, in the surrounding areas of London, he actually popularized this idea of running up to a woman, getting in front of the woman, and doing what's called a jump stop. And they actually nicknamed it in London the YAD stop. Man, I remember Sasha Daygame did that shit when I was in London in November 2010. Man, I damn near cursed him out, man. I was like, man, don't ever do that goofy shit. That shit's goofy. I ain't never ran in front of a woman and did some kind of jump stop. That shit ain't smooth, man. That shit ain't smooth. I ain't gonna say it'll never result in you getting a woman's phone number or whatever, but it ain't smooth, man. I have never encouraged any of my male clients to do anything like that. That shit makes you look corny. In my opinion, that's just my own opinion. That shit makes you look corny, man. But as far as, so yeah, in the area of pushback, yeah, a lot of people, a lot of younger dating coaches and PUAs, they don't even really believe in cold approaching anymore. Mainly because so many people are into online dating. I think that's one reason why a lot of people don't believe in cold approaching, because of online dating. But yeah, I've always believed in initiating a conversation with a new female acquaintance, whether it was at a social function, while I'm in the post office, the grocery store, the bookstore, wherever I am. Man, I don't have no problem as long as I can be smooth about it. That's my big thing. As long as I can do it in a smooth manner. I'm not going to ever initiate a conversation with a woman if I come across looking overly aggressive, corny, creepy, weird, whatever. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, man. Let me think. Anything else? Commentary related to rule number 1. Rule number 1. Oh, I know one other thing. Yeah, under the category of potential contradictions, one of the first times I had a couple guys, no, more than a couple guys, a few guys, tried to mildly accuse me of contradicting myself. Some guys said, Alan, right after my book, Who Said Again came out in December 2011, a lot of guys said, hey, Alan, man, I hate to point this out, man, but you kind of contradicted yourself. I said, how so? They said, in your Mo 1 book, you said always approach a woman and initiate a conversation with a woman if you find her physically attractive and sexually appealing. And I said, yes. Then they said, but in Who Said Again, in one of your chapters, you basically say to wait for indicators of interest, which is a conventional PUA term, indicators of interest, or some people call them choosing signals. Indicators of interest and or choosing signals. And some guys say, yeah, man, this is one chapter where it sounds like you saying you should wait for indicators of interest or choosing signals first before you approach a woman. That's actually not 100% true. I ain't gonna say it's totally false, it's not 100% true. And Who Said Again, I don't specifically say wait for indicators of interest or wait for choosing signals before approaching a woman. But what I do say is, if you want to get a good read on a woman as far as whether or not she's a wholesome pretender or an erotic hypocrite type, you need to take a few seconds, if not a minute or two, to read her body language. Read her body language. See, there's a difference between reading a woman's body language and waiting for indicators of interest. Some people think those two are the same thing, but they're not 100% the same thing. Reading a woman's body language, taking time to read a woman's body language is not exactly the same thing as waiting for indicators of interest or choosing signals. When you wait for indicators of interest or choosing signals, that means basically you're waiting for a woman to exhibit obvious flirtatious behavior towards you. You're waiting for a woman to exhibit obvious flirtatious behavior towards you. That's waiting for indicators of interest or waiting for choosing signals. Whereas reading a woman's body language is simply paying attention to how she uses her eyes, how she walks, how she talks, those type of things. So those are not things, but yeah, that was the first time in my career as a book author and dating coach where I had at least a few people that tried to accuse me of somewhat contradicting myself. But no, that's not a contradiction. I still think you should always, if you see a woman that you think is physically attractive and sexually appealing, and she doesn't have on a wedding finger, a wedding finger. If she doesn't have on a wedding finger, I hope she got all fingers. If she doesn't have a wedding ring on her finger or an engagement ring on her finger, then go ahead and approach. As long as you don't run up to them and do no damn jump stop looking all goofy. So that's rule number 1. Now, moving on to rule number 2 I had in my 1999 ebook version of Mo 1, Let the Women Know What You're Really Thinking. Yeah, I had this in chapter 8 of my 1999 version, ebook version of Mo 1. Rule number 2, once you have initiated a conversation with a woman, never pretend like you're interested in being that woman's purely platonic friend. As mentioned earlier in this ebook, I refer to this sort of behavior as fun clubbing. Most people should be familiar with my term, fun clubbing. Yeah, that's what fun clubbing. Fun clubbing is when you temporarily or indefinitely pretend like you're content with being a woman's purely platonic male friend, when in actuality, you want that woman to either be your next long-term girlfriend or your next casual sex lover. That's fun clubbing. Also, never engage in more than roughly 3 minutes of trivial, inconsequential small talk and chit-chat with women. Too much small talk will cause women to view you as a candidate to become their next male platonic friend, who they will simply use to entertain them and make them laugh when they are bored or lonely. Now, of course, I expand on rule number 2 in my book, The Possibility of Sex, and most recently in No Free Attention. So yeah, I expand on rule number 2 from my 1999 ebook. And both are the truth, man. Number 1, man, you should never be fun clubbing with women. You should never be fun clubbing with women. I've had a lot of my clients who have admitted that they've been guilty of fun clubbing with women for a period of days, weeks, months, sometimes even years. Yeah. I don't believe in ever talking to a woman, carrying on a conversation with a woman as if you're like giving her the impression that you're cool with just being her platonic friend. I'm not cool with that, man. I'm all about making it clear to women that you're trying to date them or fuck them. I'm all about making that clear in the early part of your very first conversation. You should make it clear to a woman basically that the reason I'm talking to you is because I either want to be in a long-term boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship with you, or because I want to casually fuck you. And of course, I've gotten pushback on that. A lot of guys don't agree with that. Like, I remember, speaking of 1999, when I introduced my first ebook back in 1999, I had quite a few guys on different message boards, discussion forums, and blog sites. They was like, I don't know, man. I don't know about that. I don't know about that, Alan, man. I don't know. That's the number one phrase people would use back then. They would say, that's representative of coming on to a woman too strong. A lot of guys would say that. They would say, Alan, with all due respect, that's representative coming on to a woman too strong. I would never want to come up to a woman right off the gate, say, hey, I want you to be my next girlfriend, or hey, I want you to be my next fuck buddy. That's way too forward, and that's coming across way too strong. Insert dog face here. Coming on too strong. So you're basically saying you'd rather run the risk of having a woman waste your time, and in some cases both your time and money, being friend zoned, than just have the balls to just straight up tell a woman that you're trying to date her or you're trying to fuck. That's goofy, man. That's goofy. But anyway, I ain't going to a long digression. But yeah, man, I had a lot of guys starting with 1999 who gave me pushback on that. Now, next to pushback, have I ever since then contradicted my attitude towards fun clubbing? Not in the least. If anything, my criticism of fun clubbing has intensified over the last roughly 23 years, more so than lightened up and become more lenient about it. I don't believe any man should be fun clubbing with women, man. I don't believe any man should be fun clubbing with women, man. But there were some guys back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were some guys who believed that was the best, most effective way to get a woman in bed. They would tell guys, here's what you do. You meet a woman, and for like the first week or two, pretend like you just want to be like her platonic friend. Like you're not even trying to get in her pants. Just pretend like you want to be one of her platonic friends. And then maybe starting with week number 3 or week number 4 is when you slowly but surely start dropping like sexual innuendo and being real, make subtle physical moves and blah, 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 blah. Man, to me, the goofiest thing a man can do and the most cowardly thing a man can do is to try to get laid by pretending he's not trying to get laid. I've said that ever since I was in my 20s, man. That is the absolute dumbest, goofiest, corniest, and cowardly way to try to get a woman in bed. Is by trying to get a woman in bed by pretending that you're not trying to have sex with her. And that's what you're doing when you're fun clubbing with women, man. You're basically trying to get laid by pretending like you have no interest in having sex with a woman. Which is stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. But no, I've never contradicted that rule. Again, that's a rule that I expand on in at least 2 of my other books. The Possibility of Sex and more recently, No Free Attention. I talk about avoiding fun clubbing. Matter of fact, like in No Free Attention, that is, I think, chapter number 4. Yeah, chapter 4. I cover that in chapter 4 of No Free Attention. If you own No Free Attention, I cover rule number 2 in chapter 4 of No Free Attention, man. I said basically the same. Never ever fun club with women, man. Never ever fun club. That's just goofy, man. That would fall under mode 3. Fun clubbing falls under mode 3. Yeah, when you're fun clubbing, that means you're exhibiting a variation of mode 3 behavior. Okay, now I'm going to move on to rule number 3. Rule number 3 from my 1999 ebook version of Mode 1, Let the Women Know What You're Really Thinking.